again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We've got a good topic for you today that I think we all have an answer to. Let's do it. What's the scariest way you've been woken up? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Either being carried by a fireman out of my bedroom as a kid while my house filled up with smoke, or my wife frantically shoving me awake while my dogs were going bananas because someone was trying to break into our bedroom as an adult. Edit. We were spending our first week in a new rental. Around 4 a.m., wife started shaking me awake, frantically saying my name. I, very groggily, turned on my light and asked what was up. The dogs were barking like I'd never heard before, but it didn't register. She just kept pointing at the sliding door to the balcony outside our bedroom. I saw a bulge in the curtain and sleepily assumed it was my toddler sleepwalking. I walked over and pulled the curtain to put him back to bed, and there was a guy trying to open the door. Wife knew he was there because she saw his silhouette, but I didn't because I turned the light on. She was too scared to spit it out. We both stared at each other in shock. He smiled and waved and pantomimed me letting him in. I pantomimed him getting lost. He shook his head and motioned again to get in. I motioned again for him to get lost and closed the curtain to put my pants on and go outside and yell at him. Halfway down the stairs, I finally woke up and realized I should call the police. He was long gone, but they picked him up and wandering around town. When I requested the police report, I found out the cop who came out changed the story to keep the would-be intruder out of trouble. No mention of him trying to get in. He changed it to knocking, so it wasn't an attempted B&E or trespassing. He did end up in detox for a while, somewhere between 3 to 7 days, which I was told meant he was high. Turns out, his mom was the landlord, and he used to break into the empty house to sleep it off so she didn't find out. He didn't see our vehicle or stuff when he scaled the wall to get in. We moved 2 months later, when she raised the rent $300 per month, and after the second time we called the police on her son. When my daughter was 2 months old, we had a small device that you clip to a diaper and it monitored baby's breathing. If it didn't detect breath in 3 seconds, it started vibrating to nudge the baby to breathe. If after another 5 seconds nothing happened, it started beeping like crazy, louder and louder every moment. Nothing was done. One night, I was woken up by very, very loud beeping of said device. I was completely alone and exhausted that night, so I was scared shitless. I had 112 dial in my phone when I rushed to her crib, crying and screaming into the phone for an ambulance. Thank God the device just slipped somehow from the diaper and was lying next to my unharmed, healthy and breathing baby. I didn't get any more sleep that night. I have chills just thinking about that night. My oldest sister and her 2 daughters were my roommates. Her youngest child, who was 3 years old, sleptwalked. She was small, white, blonde, and loved to wear an oversized white nightgown. Yes, I woke up to the sound of someone sucking their thumb right next to my head. I rolled over and saw the smallest ghost ever. Kids say and do the darndest things. Glad you're okay. I was donating blood but passed out during it. Had a nightmare while I was passed out that evil doctors were trying to take my blood and my life. Woke up to about 6 doctors trying to pin me down because the needle was still inside of me and I was having spasms. I thought I woke up to those evil doctors though, so I screamed as if my life depended on it and started fighting the doctors until one of them yelled, "Madam, you're at the blood bank, you're donating blood." And then I remembered. My friend is a horrible practical joker. We were on a road trip out in the desert. I fell asleep in the passenger seat. He drove his pickup really close to the rear of an 18-wheeler that was traveling in the same direction as us. Then he slammed on the brakes, screamed, and gave the mom-style protection right across my chest. I woke up thinking we were in a crash, and then I had to listen to his stupid giggling ass for the next 100 miles. I was awakened by the screams of my girlfriend's college roommate. She was yelling, "Get off me, please stop." I jumped up and went to her door and started yelling that I was coming in. She just kept on screaming. My first thought was it was her giant wrestling boyfriend, and I was going to be in a fight I would probably lose. Then I thought, what if it's something supernatural, or a rapist who didn't give a shit I was coming in? I had all these thoughts in a matter of 3 seconds. I opened the door. It was a stray cat who climbed through her window and was stuck in the covers on her bed. I could still hear that scream and feel that fear. Was a conscript with the German army, out in the woods on an exercise, constant gunfire, no sleep, all that was good and fun. But I did freak out when a mole decided to come to the surface in our tent, had no floor, just earth, and proceeded to crawl into my sleeping bag. Woke up by its sharp claws ripping on my leg, freaked the F out, got yelled at for making noise at a tactical situation. Punishment was that I had to sleep outside, and the effing mole slept in a box with hay and milk in my tent. Still hate that stupid mole. It was almost 7 years ago, but it still scares me. So it was a stormy night in Texas, and I went to sleep. After a bit, I woke back up because there was loud thunder and lightning. All of a sudden, I see this god-awful eye-blinding light, and not even a second after, I hear the loudest ear-deafening sound. A couple seconds after, I hear the fire alarms ring all around the house. And at that point, I knew our house had just been struck by lightning. If you know the modern fire alarms, they aren't super loud, but these ones are horrible. So my mom put the kids outside near the curb in the soaking wet rain and thunder to check for a fire at 2 a.m. This is kind of ironic. This house was for sale, so we couldn't file a claim if we had our house on the market. So we had to pay almost $2,000 out of pocket. I still remember the flash of light and the bang right after. I literally thought I was going to die. Luckily our house wasn't on fire, so we were fine, but it was still super scary. As a mom of kids ranging in age from 1 to 12, I was woken up by the sound of frantic "I'm drowning" splashing coming from the upstairs bathroom. I've never leapt out of bed so fast in my life. To make it worse, as I was sprinting up the stairs, I could hear my husband right behind me. He sleeps through everything, so the fact that he was on his feet and racing up the stairs made it even more terrifying. We get to the kids' bathroom, and I just know the 1-year-old has somehow fallen in, and I'm just praying it isn't too late. It was the cat. Stupid cat fell into the bathtub my 12-year-old forgot to drain. Never did go back to sleep that night. Too much adrenaline, I assume. That was 5 years ago. Cat is still alive, and well. That adrenaline spike when you feel that your children or kids around you are in danger is palpable. So, you did the right thing, of course, and glad it turned out all right. And cats are the worst and the best. I sometimes get exploding head syndrome, where you suddenly hear a loud slamming or a bang that wakes you up, even though nothing's been slammed. But one night I had that and was woken up, but I couldn't move my body. Sleep paralysis. Couldn't move or talk or do anything. I tried to move my hand, and it's weird. I could see it moving in front of my face, but I wasn't actually moving it. It was like an out-of-body experience. Then I was trying to call out for my partner for help. He was asleep next to me. I couldn't talk or grunt or do anything. I heard a voice say, "No one will help you," and I saw a shadow moving in the corner coming toward me, but I couldn't do anything. Felt like it went on for ages, but it was probably 5 to 10 minutes being stuck there before I was able to move. Couldn't get back to sleep after and just clung on to my partner. Had to keep patting his back to make sure he was still there and I could still move. I hate sleep paralysis. Girlfriend called me as she got to her mom's house where she was staying that night. It was pretty late and I was already asleep, but was expecting the call to just chit-chat for a bit as she went to bed. But about 20 seconds into the call, as she was getting out of her car, she screams and hangs up. So I've been awake for 20 seconds and thinking my girlfriend is dead. I call her back immediately, nothing. She calls back like 2 minutes later saying that her mom was outside and scared her. 2 of the worst 2 minutes of my life, LOL. When I was 12 or 13, around midnight, I woke up to cops shining a flashlight in the window and pounding on the door. My parents sleep at the back of the house and my dad's CPAP machine blocks most noise. I had to go wake them up. Turns out they were looking for a missing kid. Nobody slept much the rest of the night. There's a happy ending though. She was found several hours later and had run away after a fight over bad grades. So not the kidnapping everyone feared it was. Although our rooster was somewhat violent, he kept an eye on the other birds, but because of his aggressive nature, only a select few people were allowed to approach him without risk of violence. He had free range of our yard for a while, but because he would attack people, we would have to pin him. He had discovered, though, that he could sort of fly out and return to our yard after we'd all gone to bed. One night, we were awakened by what appeared to be a young child screaming uncontrollably. Old Bok Bok, his name, was wandering about with a head missing. When we rushed outside to investigate, he'd been in combat with a raccoon and fallen short. Get that noise. So here's a little something about the narrator here. I love all animals, except raccoons. had an incident with my all-time favorite cat, so this kind of reminded me of that. So sorry you lost Bok Bok, but you know. Hear a tink tink against my window, and then my mom screaming, "Get in the effing basement!" Then I heard the wind. Sounded like a train. As I got to the first floor, lightning struck a tree in our yard and it exploded. Finally got to the basement and hunkered down and just listened to hell break loose outside. Straight like winds are terrifying. The storm did so much damage, school was canceled the next day, so my drama teacher asked if we wanted to start tech week a day early. Ended up being a super fun day and got to eat Japanese food. Stepbrother was in my face, sobbing and shaking me. He told me our parents were being arrested. I walked outside to a sea of police vehicles. His dad was being hogtied on the ground. My mom was currently laying in the back of a police car, kicking the window out. My younger stepbrother was threatening to let our pit bulls out. The other kids were crying. The other time was when my dad fell asleep at the wheel and we almost went off a cliff. It was a small truck. My dad driving and brother in the passenger seat and me in the middle. We were driving down a mountain at night. One of those metal things with a reflector on it stopped us. I was just a kid and the heater was on, so fell asleep right away. Woke up to that. My 75-year-old dad screaming. I jumped awake at the sound of him screaming, "No!" like he was about to drop dead. Jumped out of bed, scrambled to the door to get him petrified at what was going to find. He was yelling because he had dropped a bucket of water. He was fine. I, on the other hand, actually had heart palpitations, nausea, and could barely hold myself up from how much I was shaking. I genuinely thought I was going to find him sprawled out on the ground dead. And because I already have an anxiety disorder which affects me physically, the stress from that triggered an acid reflux flare-up. Thanks, Dad. Woken up at about 2 a.m. by an almighty crashing and banging coming from the kitchen. Shat myself. Ran to the top of the stairs. The kitchen door was closed, no light on, but still all manner of chaos going on. Called the police and shouted out that I'd done so. After a minute, even I thought the burglar can't be that stupid to carry on, so I crept down and flung the door open. It was a cat. It had gotten in through the cat flap, where I locked one way and couldn't get out and was going apeshit. I managed to get past it and open the door and it flew out, mess everywhere. Cops rolled up a minute later and I had fun explaining it to them. Took me an hour to calm down again. I purposely went to sleep in the passenger seat. I had contemplated actually removing my seatbelt, but didn't because the driver had a track record of small accidents. My friend then also fell asleep while driving. I woke up to us rolling 5 times across a highway and into a ditch. Thankfully, we had just gotten off the interstate. We barely missed a huge drop-off into a dry gorge a few feet back. I legit woke up to spinning. Things like a Nokia brick cell phone, CDs, and windshield glass flying around and the sounds of screaming from both of us. Thankfully, she was unhurt, but freaking the F out about her truck and screaming. A nurse who had seen and stopped to help shoved me out of the way as I climbed out to check on her because of her freakout. You would have thought she had a limb ripped off the way she was screaming. Not a scratch on her though. I had a slashed elbow and a huge bruise on my thigh where the aforementioned Nokia connected with it. It was pretty horrifying to wake up to. That was her 4th wreck and worst while we were together, and her last. We never traveled together again. So back when I was in high school, my family lived in a very rural area. I think our closest neighbors were nearly a mile away. Anyway, one night I woke up at around 2 a.m. to barking. Important to note that we were a cat family. We didn't own a dog, so I get up and check the living room window. There are 2 giant black Rottweilers in our yard. I'm too stunned to do anything, so I just watched these dogs until they run off. In my infinite wisdom, honestly, I was probably too tired to think right. I wrote a note. Big dogs at 2, ran off. Well, the next morning, my sister had an early morning practice for whatever sport she was in at the time, and since she couldn't drive, my dad woke up at like 5:30 a.m. to take her. He found my note and kinda got freaked out. When I woke up, he asked me about it, and I told him what I saw. He then asked if I was sure, like maybe I'd dreamt it. I honestly didn't know, so we went to our yard and looked around to see if we could find any evidence of our visitors. Turns out the dogs mauled one of our cats right below the window. I watched them from a previous night.